Today we are going to watch a 2016 sci-fi, romance and drama movie called Passengers. The Avlo spacecraft is traveling through space, heading to a new world called Homestead. To all of the spacecraft's rooms are empty. The 258-member crew and 5,000 passengers are lying dormant. Energy is transferred to the main shield, but the ship is in the process of colliding with a giant asteroid, but one of the sleeping compartments activated. The passenger who woke up was Jim, a mechanical engineer. His compartment opens and an automated system helps wake him up, telling him he's spent 120 years in a hovering animatronic state and that the ship is only 4 months away from Homestead 2. Jim receives instructions on his ID bracelet, his cabin, and the main activities he must participate in before coming to this planet. Excited and thrilled to meet those on board, he readied himself, leaving his cabin and entering an automated classroom for the whole study group. Jim looked a little worried as the hologram explained the situation on Earth, calling it overcrowded, expensive, and exaggerated. Jim eventually went to the observatory, where he discovered that the ship was actually 90 years old. He realizes he's woken up too early, so he runs to the lobby and sends a message to Earth asking what he should do, because he doesn't know how to get back to sleep. The intercom informed him that the call to Earth would take about 55 years to be answered. When going to get him a drink, Jim realizes that he is a robot. His name is Arthur. Jim wants to know more about him, but he can't even explain to robot how he got there in advance. He drinks regular coffee and tries to figure out how to fix his hibernation chamber. After having all the tools, he managed to make it work and lay down inside the case. He then decided to use the tools he found to get into the crew's hibernation chamber. That didn't work either. Minor glitches occurred around the ship. Jim keeps coming back to the bar to drink, but mostly to talk to Arthur. The robot gives him some advice that convinces him to break into one of the golden classrooms and try to have some fun on the train. One day, he was drunk and wandering around the hibernation chambers when he fell into an airlock with his spacesuit designed for spacewalks. Jim put on a suit and went to the airlock, pressed the lever and then pressed the button to open the airlock. He pulls the lever, ready to stop everything, but changes his mind at the last moment, turns inside and slides out a bottle. Jim gets up and is immediately attracted to a woman in one of the pods, named Aurora. He searches her records in the phone book and listens to his passenger's interview, then falls in love with her. Then he found him sitting next to his compartment, still listening to his interviews back at the bar. He reads some of his work and talks to Arthur about his writing. He is haunted by his ironic circumstances, goes to another planet for a better life, wakes up early and doesn't make it in time, and finds his perfect wife, just because she is there. Out of reach, Jim didn't stop thinking about her, and also started thinking about waking her up. Jim decided against it first, but over time, he couldn't ignore it. Until the day he changed his mind. He goes to his hibernation chamber, and manages to activate it when she wakes up, and goes through the same process as him. He hides and returns to his room. Moments later, he made his way to the main hall, hoping to find her, and there she was, as confused as a year ago. Jim tells her that they were the only ones to wake her up and take her to the observatory. He then told her he couldn't reach the ship's crew or main controls. He asks Arthur not to tell Aurora that he woke her up. The next day, Aurora wakes up. She returned to the lobby and asked the automated information desk for information on sleeping pods. Jim went to meet her there, and they went to have breakfast. When they left, the information desk had some hiccups. Jim noticed more glitches all over the ship. Some time later, Aurora laments her life on Avlo. She writes, jogging around the ship and swimming in the pool, becoming increasingly aware of her plight. Jim is left alone with the robot, feeling very bad for what he did to her. The next moment, he was found tinkering with something, and in the next moment, Aurora entered the observatory to find a miniature of the Chrysler building he had made for her. Some time later, they went on a date at a bar. They dine and share stories about their lives. She tells him that her father died when she was a teenager. After dinner, Jim takes Aurora to the vent and they put on their spacesuits. They are walking in space together. Jim finally has someone to share this wonderful experience with. Jim turns off the magnets in their boots and together they float through space. They went back inside and immediately kissed, retreating to his cabin and sleeping together. A short time later, they began to live together as a couple. Aurora settled in her cabin and wrote about her life on board. One day, the ship passed a red giant, and they went to the observatory to see it. It was Aurora's birthday, so that night they celebrated it at one of the many restaurants on the ship, followed by a bar. Jim goes to the bathroom and prepares the ring he made for Aurora. While she stays at the bar talking to Arthur, the cyborg tells Aurora that Jim intentionally woke her up without knowing that he still has to keep it a secret. Suddenly, Jim returns, and she confronts him with utter disbelief. She ran away angry and scared. Aurora entered the main hall and saw that Jim had planted a tree there. Suddenly, both of them heard the bridge owner's voice on the intercom, asking who planted the tree. The two run down the hallway and see Gus Mancuso standing in front of Jim's tree. They introduced themselves and informed the leader of the situation. He doesn't understand how three groups can fail. Mancuso takes them to the bridge and he discovers that something is wrong with the ship, but the system information needs to be checked manually. As they left the bridge, a robot nearly hit them on the head. And both told Mancuso that problems were happening more frequently throughout the ship. Mancuso was checking out the groups when Jim joined him there. He found out what happened to the ship. Mancuso discovers something happened 2 years ago. Removes a large system. They must find and fix the cause of the problem, as the entire ship tries to take over. They go to find the problem, but Mancuso is already unconscious, so Jim and Aurora take him to the infirmary. He is dying, and no treatment can stop him or prolong the time he has left. Some time later, the three meet at the observatory. Mancuso gives Jim his ID bracelet, tells them to repair the ship, and immediately dies. Jim tells Aurora that he needs her help and they run to the engineering room, but there is another error in the gravity control. They finally got to the tech and started looking for the problem. They found it in the power plant, and when they opened the hatch, Aurora was sucked in. The asteroid caused a hole in the hull. In this area Jim was also sucked in, but he clung to the trapdoor because it kept closing on him. He was eventually sucked in, but they quickly managed to seal the hole. Immediately after solving this problem, Jim realized that there were many holes in the hull. The two tracked the meteor's path and discovered that it had collided with the reactor's control computer. Jim thinks he can find spare parts for her. They did it manually, but it failed again. Jim understood that he needed to open the vents from outside the ship so they could cool the reactor. He tells Aurora what happened and she moves as fast as she can to get another suit and get him in. He once again apologized to her. Aurora drags Jim to the infirmary and discovers that he's dead. She uses Mancuso's bracelet to override medical procedures and revive him. The medical module automatically does the job and revives Jim. Aurora forgives him later. Aurora repairs Arthur and they bury Mancuso in the proper space. Jim takes her to the infirmary and tells her that he's found a way to use the medical pod as a hibernation one. He tells her to get inside the pod and ride out the rest of the journey in there. But, as is later revealed, she declines and decides to stay with him, awake on the ship. Jim finally proposes to her and they live out their lives on the ship. 88 years later, the Avlo arrives on Homestead 2. The crew wakes up and finds the ship in a very unexpected state. Aurora leaves them a message, retelling the story of the life her and Jim had on the ship while the rest were sleeping.